I'm Jim Lantelmi, Chair. This is the second of 2 evenings scheduled for our public hearings this month. Tonight we'll be hearing the Vernon Street Site Plan number 461 application, and we will have a discussion of the apartment unit to hotel use conversions here in the county, as well as having reports from the various committees. Some items I'm required to share with you now. For the safety of our staff and residents, we're holding this meeting virtually. Welcome to our commissioners, county staff, applicants, and the community members who are all joining us remotely. We're legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the governor's executive orders, legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly, and the County Board's Continuity of Operations Ordinance adopted in March of 2020. Before we begin, I have a few specifics to orient everyone to our virtual environment. Tonight's meeting is available as a broadcast with closed captioning on Comcast Xfinity channels 25 and 1085, Verizon Fios channels 39 and 40, and the county website. Audio of tonight's meeting is available via phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. I understand you can use the number provided in the Teams invite, which is 347-973-6905, with a conference ID of 969-683-477#. And registered speakers have received Ms. Johnson's telephone number in their speaker registration confirmation. For other presenters and speakers joining us through Microsoft Teams, please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Please turn off the sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting's command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. If you're dialing in by phone, press *6 to unmute yourself. Commissioners, you know the drill. You're using your hand raise function. Public speakers, you will be called upon by the clerk at an assigned time. Pre-registration to speak at today's hearing was required, and we're not able to accommodate additional speakers. Public comment will take place within the same time frames as we would otherwise do in an in-person meeting. That means speakers have 3 minutes to comment as individuals and 5 minutes to speak if they're representing an organization. The timer will be displayed on screen by the clerk. If you're dialing in by phone and unable to see the screen, we will provide an audible warning when 30 seconds are remaining, and you will be muted when your time is concluded. The meeting chat is active for presenters or commissioners who need technical assistance only. Do not use the meeting chat for discussion, public comments, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All public comment must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. Finally, this is a public forum. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act requirements. Now on to our agenda items. Madam Clerk, please call our first item.
Thank you. Tonight we begin with item number 2 on the agenda, Site Plan 461 for the 1201 North Vernon Street project. We have Olivia Sontig to present this item to us this evening.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Sontig, ready? I see the slides are up.
Wonderful, thank you. So yes, Olivia Sontag with CPHD Planning Division. This is the new site plan for number 461, the Vernon Street Duplex, located at 1201 North Vernon Street. Go back one. So the site is located on the corner of North Vernon Street and Washington Boulevard, with North Glebe just to the west, and the Comfort Inn on the corner here, just for reference. The site is zoned R5 with a permitted density of 10 dwelling units per acre. The GLUP designation for the site is low residential 1 to 10 units per acre. And I'll note that the site is outside of the boundaries of the Ballston sector plan. So here are a few photos the applicant has provided of the existing site, which is currently developed with a vacant 2-story dwelling, contains 25 trees on site. The site currently has curb cuts off of both Washington Boulevard and North Vernon Street, which you can see in the photos. I also want to note the existing retaining wall at the back of the existing sidewalk fronting Washington Boulevard, and then the existing sidewalk, which is currently 5 feet wide. So the applicant proposes 2 semi-detached units to replace the existing dwelling. These units would be 3 stories tall, just under the 35-foot height limit. The density proposed is 10.43 dwelling units per acre, which is just above the allowed of 10 units per acre. The applicant proposes 2 parking spaces total, with 1 space for each unit, which does require a zoning modification. So several modifications of the zoning ordinance are requested. 2 parking spaces per unit are required, and the applicant is proposing 1 space per unit. No visitor parking is required for this site, and the site is also not eligible for the residential permit parking program. Staff supports this requested modification as it's about a half mile from the metro station, and 1 additional space can be accommodated in the driveway on Lot B. The applicant also requests a modification of the site area. The site's only 8,300 square feet, but requires an area of 8,700 square feet for the 2 semi-detached units. The lot area required is 4,350 for each lot, and Lot B is proposed to be 3,880. So staff also supports this request as the size of the site falls just short of these requirements, and the proposed development staff finds remains compatible with the density and scale of the surrounding development. Staff also supports the proposed yard setback reductions as they are similar to adjacent development, especially along Washington and North Vernon, and we do acknowledge the challenges of the narrow site geometry. So other site improvements and features include preservation of 3 on-site trees, a contribution to the underground utility fund, Green Home Choice certification at the silver level. This is a missing middle housing typology. The applicant also plans to implement visitability and accessibility standards for at least 1 of the units, which includes at least 1 0-step entrance by an accessible route from a driveway or public sidewalk. Include an accessible bathroom on the same floor as the 0-step entrance, and include doors with at least 32 inches of clear width and passageways of at least 36 inches of clear width to the accessible bathroom and eating area. And we've included this in condition 54. So we also recommend expanding the existing 5-foot sidewalk width along Washington Boulevard to 6 feet, including a dedication of a 1-foot easement to the county, and also to plant 6 trees along the back of the sidewalk on the private property in lieu of street trees in the public realm. The applicant has agreed to plant the trees, but is currently not agreeable to widen the sidewalk to 6 feet. So a little more on that. The master transportation plan designates Washington Boulevard in this location as a type E arterial. It's shown as the yellow line on the screen. And this is primarily single-family residential neighborhoods with, and it calls for a 5 to 6 foot sidewalk and a 4 to 6 foot green strip. We acknowledge the difficulty and the impracticality of providing the 4 to 6 foot green strip on a site-by-site basis. And as stated earlier, the applicant has agreed to plant trees on the back of the sidewalk on the private property to function as street trees in lieu of this streetscape requirement. So drawing on guidance from the MTP, staff does continue, however, to recommend that the applicant expand the sidewalk to 6 feet, as this is important for increased pedestrian safety, comfort, and accessibility along this 4-lane arterial street, which currently provides no buffer to pedestrians. The existing sidewalk needs repairs. The existing retaining wall, the applicant plans to remove, and that area along Washington Boulevard will be regraded, and all of those trees removed. They'll also be removing an existing curb cut along Washington, which will require some additional panels in the sidewalk to be removed and replaced. The existing bus stop will also be relocated to Vermont Street under a separate effort, which will further improve the conditions on this section of the sidewalk, but that date right now is a little bit unknown. So this is the public process timeline for the project. We held an online engagement session the first week of February, the SPRC meeting on March 29th. At the SPRC meeting, members were very supportive of the proposal, but did voice that a project this small shouldn't have a site plan process, and hope this is something that the county revisits in the future. They were supportive of the minor modifications for lot size and density, and a reduced parking ratio of 1 space per unit. They were happy to see the progress on tree retention. One person expressed concern about incompatibility with surrounding architecture, but other members noted the benefits of the flat roof design for the proposed solar. And then in response to requests about visitability, the applicant did incorporate several changes. The BVSCA did provide a letter and requested the full MTP sidewalk improvements, including the planting strip and the full sidewalk width along Washington. But at the meeting, it was acknowledged that the full planting strip would be a difficult effort along this portion of Washington. So our recommendation to the county board is to adopt the ordinance to approve the site plan for the 2 semi-detached units, including the 6-foot sidewalk along Washington Boulevard, with the modifications for lot size and density, yard setbacks, and reduced parking ratio subject to conditions 1 through 54. So that concludes the staff presentation, and I believe the applicant has a presentation prepared as well, and then afterwards staff will be available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sontag. Is the applicant prepared and ready?
Yes, thank you, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Matt Allman. I'm a land use attorney with Venable in Tysons, and I'm here representing Tomas Equities, which is the owner of the project site. And I think I need to be designated as a presenter in order to pull up the slides. Here we go. Thank you. Okay, hopefully you all can see the presentation slides.
Yes, it's up.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to Ms. Sontag for all of her efforts in this site plan project and for her presentation tonight. She did such a nice job summarizing it that we can probably move through our presentation more quickly. So I will give a very brief overview, and then I'll hand off to our project architect to show you the design in a bit more detail. But just at a high level, the project involves removal of the existing single-family home and construction of a new 2-family semi-detached duplex unit. The existing zoning is R5, as Ms. Sontag noted, and no rezoning is proposed with this application. The development consists of 2 units at a height of 35 feet and 3 stories, 2 parking spaces, as previously noted. We will be seeking Green Home Choice certification and potentially LEED for Home certification as well. As we studied the issue, we found there's quite a bit of overlap there, so there's a chance we may actually achieve both. As staff noted, the requested modifications include the lot area, both for one of the individual lots and on an aggregate basis, side and front yard setbacks, and parking ratio. We've already seen the site orientation here, so we'll move past this. And I believe these are the same photos we looked at a moment ago. I'll just point out with my mouse the location of that curb cut off of Washington Boulevard that will be closed up and reconstructed as part of the project, because I know it's a little subtle in this photo. And I will rejoin and talk a little bit about process at the end, but this is my cue to turn it over to our project architect.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Matt, you may still have to advance the slides for me.
No problem.
Good evening. I'm Charles Warren. I'm principal of Tays Warren Architects, the project architect on this project. Here you can see the architectural site plan. The proposed buildings are colored in green. You can see the new driveway location that we've adjusted through some discussions from the working with some tree preservation pieces and relocating the curb cut off of Vernon there. And probably the biggest highlight to show here is that we are proposing a flat roof in the middle here for potential future solar arrays. We're planning on putting some infrastructure in the building to allow for that. Now we could probably move on to the next slide. As architectural, this is the ground floor site plan. Here you can sort of see the configuration of the building a little bit more in detail. So they're really symmetrical units around a center demising wall. The doors you can see the little red triangles here. Those are the front doors of the building, highlighted in red, fronting off of Washington Boulevard, which is planned south on this drawing. A couple of things I wanted to just highlight here is we are proposing a single full-size parking space in the garage, but they are somewhat oversized garages, so you can potentially add, park 2 smaller vehicles or a scooter or something like that in there. So there's a little bit of flexibility there beyond the sort of minimum parking space requirement. A couple of things I just wanted to highlight is, and Ms. Sontag noted some of our visitability, that's actually a hard word to say, visitability items that we've added that have come out of the conversations from the SPRC meeting. One thing that we are showing on the left there is a new ramp to come up from the driveway to a 0 threshold door on 1201A, which is the western unit. One thing that we already had sort of baked into the project was larger clearances around the kitchen, and we already had some of those door widths already in the project, but I just wanted to highlight that we are providing those 32-inch wide doors at a minimum. We did enlarge the powder room a little bit to allow for some increased maneuverability inside that the bathroom area there. We are proposing lever handles on all the doors. And one other thing that we are proposing is to add blocking in the walls around the plumbing fixtures for the ease of future grab bars. We could probably go to the next slide. This is the updated rendering of the site plan here. You can see the shift that we made for the driveway to the north to retain some of those existing trees along the property line there, the top right corner, the planned right corner, which is the northeast corner of the site. There's a pretty comprehensive stormwater management plan that's part of this project. That includes stormwater planters along the north wall to capture and control rain that falls on the site. As Ms. Sontag noted, we are proposing the 6, this plan is showing the 6 trees along the backside of the curb, but we are currently continuing to explore those options for additional tree preservation of some of those trees that are there now, as opposed to just tearing out everything. Next slide, please. Exterior materials, we are proposing high quality sustainable materials for the building. This does include the cementitious siding, which doesn't rot, is part of the reason why we're proposing that. We are also proposing a thermally modified wood siding that has the look and feel of a more natural material, but ages gracefully and doesn't rot as well. The main material that we're proposing is a stucco finish. which allows for some exterior insulation or continuous exterior insulation, which further improves the energy performance of the building. And overall, you know, we are trending towards more of a modern building, but we do think it has a warmth and a softness to the overall project. Next slide. There's some context images just sort of giving you a sense of the scale. We could probably go over this pretty quickly, but we think that one of the massing strategies is really to bring down the scale of the building to more of a two-story reed along the edges and really put the massing kind of in the middle of the building, but you can see it sort of seams in pretty well with the surrounding context. And quickly run you through some of the conceptual images of the project. This is the view standing catty corner across Washington Boulevard. And I think everybody is aware Washington Boulevard is a very busy street. I think that guy on the bike is taking his life into his own hands. But we are proposing a fence line along that street, and I think we are adjusting that through some of the other comments there, but trying to create a little bit of a buffer between that the busy thoroughfare there and the existing or the proposed buildings. Next slide. This is the view across Vernon Street, where you can see the new curb cut and the driveway leading to the garages. This is where we're proposing to wrap that wood siding along this edge to help soften the materiality to the more residential single-family structures to the north. And this view also gives you a pretty good sense of the proposed setback at the third floor that helps break down the massing of the building really to a two-story reed at the street level here. Overall concept aerial view, this sort of just gives you a sense of that massing strategy where we're trying to concentrate the height more in the middle of the building and sort of tear it down to the edges. You know, with the porches, the two-story element and the three-story element really concentrated more in the middle. And I think this is the last rendering. This is you know, another aerial view, just highlighting that that massing strategy that we're employing. The white area on the roof there you can see is you know, pretty open area for a potential solar array, and that's why we sort of left it as a flat roof. There is the ability to add that pretty easily as a retrofit situation. And I think that's the last image, Matt.
Okay,
Great. Thank you, Charles. So I'll just, we've got one more slide here, maybe two. A brief summary of the project process. Although the project is not a large one, we've actually been through a fairly lengthy entitlement process dating all the way back to September of 2019 with a concept plan submission. We lost a little bit of time, obviously, due to COVID, and that's, of course, no one's fault. And I think since we're on record, staff and the county leadership should be commended for their efforts to pivot to these virtual meetings. I think they've been very successful. Anyway, that's just my personal thank you to staff, but we did lose a little bit of time with that. We also lost a little bit of time redesigning the project after the first application submission in April. And that was due to a zoning interpretation regarding the orientation of the building entrances. Under our initial submission, we had a little more emphasis on the Vernon Street entryways, and we had to adjust that. In any event, we did kick off site plan in January, and you see we had an online community engagement session in February, site plan review committee meeting in March, and we are now at public hearing. So at this point, I believe we're in a pretty good place. We've made a lot of great improvements to the project. I think the one element where we still have a little bit of disagreement with the staff, as noted, is the request for a wider sidewalk along Washington Boulevard. We're happy to share more about our thinking on that. We've got precedent images if we need to pull those up for context. But in summary, I would just say that we've evaluated it, and we think it doesn't really move the needle all that much in terms of benefit to the circulation or pedestrian realm along the frontage when weighed against the additional time and cost for the project. So thank you for your attention tonight. We appreciate you having us. We're very excited about this project. We think it does, for such a small project, we think it offers a lot of exciting, positive value, not only to this site, but to the community in terms of its green building features, in terms of the tree preservation that's going to be achieved, in terms of some of the visibility accommodations that have been made late in the process. And on just a much higher level, we think this is a really unique test case for missing middle housing. And to have gone through the site plan process at the same time the county is working on their missing middle study has led to a lot of really interesting conversations with staff, and just a unique experience for our team to be proposing a project like this that you don't see every day. At the same time, we're having these discussions about how to create missing middle housing and where these types of projects fit in. And with that, we thank you again for your attention, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Allman. Madam Clerk, do we have any comments? You're on mute. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Jim?
Do we have any public commenters tonight?
Yes, we do. June O'Connell is on the line to speak this evening.
Okay, she's ready to go. Ms. O'Connell?
It's on item 3.
No, this is about the Vernon Street duplex.
Right, I know, but I'm a public speaker on the next item, not this item.
Okay, then we'll just wait until that item comes up. Thank you. Are there any other comments for this one?
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay. So none for Vernon Street, right?
No, no speakers.
Do we have any commissions here who wish to comment or present? Okay, this was not before the Transportation Commission, so there's no report from the TC. I think we can now move on to the Sbrc report. Commissioner Patel, are you ready?
I am. Excuse me. So yes, everybody should have received my memo about this particular project. I do not obviously want to repeat anything that's already been said tonight about this particular project. There were a couple of items that are flagged for discussion, and you've heard those in both presentations. Of course, one is the sidewalk width. The other issue that came up during Sbrc, for which there was not an answer necessarily, was the issue around visitor parking. I will note that you've all seen the plans and the specifications, and speaking with Ms. Sontag, there may not be an answer to visitor parking at this particular site. You've also heard that this is not a location that's eligible for RPP as well. One unit may have the ability to have a visitor parking spot, but the other unit would probably not, and would end up having to rely kind of on the neighborhood, I think is what we heard as an answer. Slide 7, I think, of the presentation from Ms. Sontag addresses transit in that area, as well as parking. I think it identified it as medium as well. So that is a particular area for discussion. The sidewalk, this was a specific area that was addressed during Sbrc. There was a lot of comment around concerns over the Washington Boulevard feeling unsafe for pedestrians walking along the sidewalk, as well as cyclists, given the way that that Washington Boulevard is now being used. I think that the issue kind of came down to there probably needs to be broader discussion on what happens with Washington Boulevard and how transportation, all forms of transportation are moved along Washington Boulevard. It probably needs to be a larger conversation, but it does come up within the context of this particular project with regard to the width of the project, the width of the sidewalk. I will note that there has been conversation around missing middle and some discussion around what what we may have wanted to see with regard to this project, and specifically comments around it not coming to kind of a formal planning process like Planning Commission, and looking to kind of amend the zoning ordinance or simplify the process so it didn't have to come before us. There are obviously concerns and thoughts that go both ways on that. There was good conversation about trying to avoid these processes at the SPRC, but those conversations probably land within the discussion around missing middle, more so than focusing them here on this particular site. Finally, there was some conversation around looking at missing middle and addressing housing affordability in the context of creating additional inventory and housing types. And again, I've been informed by staff that as the missing middle study, its primary focus is on housing typology, but there may be other opportunities and forum for us to be talking about addressing affordability within the concept of that missing middle study. All that is essentially to say that the missing middle study is an ongoing issue, and there needs to be, we probably as a commission need to be thinking about how best to impress our thoughts upon that study in the context of some of the bigger issue items that fall beyond the scope of 1201 North Vernon Street, in particular this project. But with regard to this specific project, the two primary areas of focus that have come out of SPRC and continue to be issues are the sidewalk width and the visitor parking. The applicant has, as you've heard already, has done a great job addressing the other issues, which include tree preservation, as well as visitability, and have incorporated, I think, almost all of the recommendations around visitability. And they have further, I guess, suggestions around tree preservation, should they not be required to extend the sidewalk to 6 feet. But again, the primary focus is on those two areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Patel, for a very thorough discussion there, or presentation there. The item is now with the Commission. I think the way we can address this, we really have pretty much 3 things to discuss that I will list, and if any commissioners have other items they'd like to add, certainly, then raise your hand when I'm done. I think I'd like to touch on the visitor parking first. Then we can move on to the sidewalk width, which would include the tree issue. And then if we want to have some comments on missing middle, how we think this could fit into that larger discussion, I'd rather we not spend too much time on that given the ongoing study, but certainly I think some impressions might not be a bad idea. Are there any other items that any commissioner would like to add to this list? Yes, Commissioner Schroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions regarding the future solar array.
Okay, I'll add that. Commissioner Bagley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to, in an umbrella thing, a couple of follow-up items from SPRC, just to see what the comments from the applicant are.
Okay, SPRC.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, let's move on to the visitor parking. Does anybody have any comments that they would like to, or questions they'd like to raise on that topic? Yes, Commissioner Bagley.
Yeah, we know in that area, and the neighbors specifically also said this, it came up during the SPRC meeting. Is there any possibility that there is a lot there at the hotel right around the corner? Is that paid parking? Is there extra parking there? I mean, somebody's going to have to put their car someplace if they're visiting. They're not going to be happy if they can't park close by, and then neighbors aren't going to be happy if somebody else's car or cars are hogging limited spaces there. So I'm just wondering if somebody has thought about possibly other resources.
I'll let the applicant address this first, and then staff can jump in.
Thank you. So we've not looked at the hotel property as a possible source of, visitor or spillover parking. I don't know what the exact parking requirement is for the hotel site, but I think a predicate to anyone's ability to use space there would be to determine whether they even have any excess to start with. That's not an analysis that we've performed. I think the discussion of the SPRC report is probably most accurate. We think that there's a little bit of flexibility in the garages for some additional parking and or in the driveway for tandem spaces. But beyond that, we believe that visitors would likely be parking on the street. I think that's the only realistic option.
Commissioner Hughes?
Thanks, Commissioner Lantomi. Just to follow up to Mr. Altman's point for staff, please confirm this is a site plan project. So therefore, if my memory is right, this area is RPP'd and therefore the owners of these units would be ineligible for the RPP zoning here?
No, because this is a site plan and the existing building is being demolished, they are not eligible for the RPP program.
Correct. So they will not be eligible for the RPP, and the nearest street parking in which they're available would be what, Washington and Liberty? Staff?
Jane, do you know the answer to that question? Jane Kim?
Yes, I believe that Quincy would be the closest non-permitted street in the vicinity.
Right. So any visitor, just for my fellow commissioners, I probably will abstain this evening, not because I don't appreciate the applicant, and more importantly, to our poor applicant who's come forward with this amazing proposal, but because I believe the method of which it's going forward is not necessarily appropriate. And I think this is just one more example of how that drives the point home. So any guests who visit this home will also have to go to Quincy to park.
Only if they cannot be accommodated within the driveways or the garages or the tandem area. I mean, there is space on site if the property owners want their visitors to park on their property.
And still maintain access to their own, or are you talking about double parking yourself in? I mean, I do it on my own driveway too.
It likely would be a tandem situation, but I mean, when I had a tandem driveway, I let, visitors block me in. So
Ms. Kim, I understand. Yeah. I just want to make sure that we have for the record. And just to remind me, is tandem parking allowed inside of our parking qualifications for site plans?
We're only counting the explicit parking spaces with this application. So each lot has one official parking space.
And if memory serves me right, by right townhomes require 1.1.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Thank you, Commissioner Lantomi.
Okay, I have another actually clarifying question for the RPP. Is the RPP on these blocks 24/7, or is it the standard 8 to 5 days a week? You know.
I don't believe it's 24/7. I believe this portion of Ballston is until 6 p.m. I could be wrong. I can double check that though. Okay. I don't believe it's a 24/7 situation. They're far enough away from the metro.
And not on the weekends.
Right. It would be available. Parking for anyone would be available on the weekends.
And Washington Liberty is pretty far, but across 66, which is only a few blocks away, are they in an RPP zone to the north?
Across 66. Yes, portions of the neighborhood streets on the other side of 66 are RPP as well, in a different zone, actually.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. That's good information. Yeah, I personally don't have a concern about parking here because I figure the people who end up living in this duplex will informally have a deal among themselves as having visitors in those driveways, even partly in the garage, or in front of the garage door. So I don't think this is a particular concern. And I don't think it's anything that would prevent me from voting for this. Are there any other commissioners who want to weigh in on this issue? Okay, Let's then move on to the sidewalk width, which we can also include the trees on that, the street trees in that discussion. Opening up for comments or questions. Yes, Commissioner Bagley, and then Commissioner Steinberg.
Yeah, I would just say, as somebody who lives not too far away from there, and I deliberately avoid that side of the street as much as possible to walk on the sidewalk because it is just too scary. So any additional space we can have between a pedestrian and extremely fast moving traffic there, I think is in everyone's best interest. Thank you.
Commissioner Steinberger.
Yes, thank you. In terms of the sidewalk width, I mean, I appreciate what we've heard sort of from county staff and from the applicant. My concern at this point really is similar to what Commissioner Bagley has addressed, that is already a narrow, sort of not as inviting experience for pedestrians on that street, and that anything we can do to improve that. I understand that it would be only one portion we were getting to 6 feet, and I know the applicant has made that point, you know, in multiple forums and formats, but I really think that any level of improvement is a substantive improvement in this regard, and we need to take that seriously and take this opportunity to offer that to the pedestrian experience. I'm very supportive of this design and the duplex overall. I think it really is, you know, an opportunity to take what was a single family home and really get more housing out of that in the context of what we're doing here is vital. But I think we also need to think about what improvements we can make for the pedestrian experience at that same location. And this is the opportunity to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberger. Commissioner Sarli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to associate myself with the previous comments, so I won't repeat them here. But I think the concern here is the shy zone tends to go up in requirement with the speed of cars, and given the speed of cars traveling along Washington, I think staff is correct to sort of ask for a bit of a widening. And I'm hesitant to suggest design solutions, you know, during these commissions, but if we could perhaps make a concession on the bus stop area so that anyone that's waiting in that area in particular, if there's a shelter or some sort of a seating that infringes a little bit on the property, some sort of easement, and I don't know the legalese that goes with these, to allow pedestrian traffic to maintain that same width while someone's waiting for the bus. And I don't know what the bus count is on here, but I think, you know, as much as we can foresee any conflicts of people sitting and people moving and try to create, like, you know, spot opportunities for them to avoid each other and thus, you know, provide a little bit of that shy zone safety factor, I think would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sarli. I'd like to weigh in this also. I think the other commissioners have noted a couple things which also concern me. This stretch of Washington Boulevard, I absolutely agree, is a nightmare for pedestrians. And traffic does move very fast along this very narrow right-of-way. What I question is whether this piecemeal way of addressing the deficiencies of this right-of-way really makes any sense. If this was a by right development and a mansion is going up, we could say no, we wouldn't be here and the sidewalk would remain exactly as it is. The stretch of Washington Boulevard from Kirkwood to Glebe Road is a narrow right-of-way, 4 lanes, way fast traffic, probably not enough traffic signals on it, very bad sidewalk experience on both sides for virtually the entire stretch of it. The lots along both sides of it tend to be very small. The only large one is now being, the only large one's actually being done right now at Washington and Kirkwood, and there's one large apartment building which isn't going anywhere. We do not have any opportunities coming up really to do any, you know, it'll be done piecemeal, and to complete it would take literally decades if it ever does get completed. What I think really needs to happen here is staff to add to yet another list of things that needs to be done, but a total rethinking of the right-of-way between Kirkwood and Glebe Road to take advantage or to use that narrow right-of-way in a different way This is along the edges of the Ballston sector plan. This street is not properly classified. It should not be a 4-lane highway. It should be 2 lanes with a turn lane, with the extra lanes turned over to bicycles and pedestrians. That would slow traffic, which is one clear problem here. Would make it easier for people to walk. This is an eminently walkable area that cries out for a good walking environment, and the only way that can really be accomplished in our lifetimes and in an effective way possible is a total reimagining of that corridor. I think this is something that DES needs to add to its list of things to do. We already have changed it in other areas of the county. We've narrowed Wilson Boulevard to 3 lanes. Even Washington Boulevard, west of Glebe Road, narrows down to 2 lanes until Westover. I don't see the need for a high traffic, high speed area here, given that we have Wilson Boulevard to the south, we have 66 to the north, we have Fairfax Drive, all of which can handle way more traffic properly than this can. So I am not really in favor of dealing with this sidewalk here in this manner through site plans. That said, I think we have no other comments on the sidewalk issue. Yes, Mr. Allman.
Thank you. I'll just quickly point out there was a comment made about the bus stop and the need to provide some relief for folks who may be using that. And just as a reminder, the bus stop is being relocated. So we think that's perhaps another factor for consideration when we look at the sidewalk and the appropriate width. Thank you.
It will be off of this site. It's on a different block then when it gets relocated.
Yes, it will be moving to Vermont.
And that means we won't have the sign in the middle of the sidewalk anymore either, the flag.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sarli.
Just a quick comment. I was reacting to the rendering then, so you might want to correct the rendering, but thank you.
Good idea. Why don't we move on to the solar array before we get to the other issues? Commissioner Schroll, you had that as an issue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, kudos to the applicant for, thinking about designing the building to allow for a future solar array and, having proper kind of east-west orientation, and that's great. So a couple of questions. One, would like to know what you're doing to incorporate kind of solar-ready design. Let me start there.
Yeah, that's the applicant.
Yes, thank you for that question. In terms of solar ready design, just to get some clarity on that, I think what we're proposing to do is to basically put in the conduit for it, and we've pre-sized it for, we think we can get an 8 kilowatt solar array there. And we actually get fairly close to a net zero performance out of the building. We're still working through some of that stuff, but part of why we're just sort of leaving it to the end user to sign the contracts and stuff for that installation of the solar array. But we're trying to bake that into the design as much as we can.
That's good. Yeah, so that helps. And yeah, running the conduit is good, and making sure that you have the right ability to kind of tie into your existing transformer and whatnot, or existing panel, like, you don't have any complications there. So maybe, I don't know if you've looked at that. Sounds like you're kind of looking at that. Definitely more costly to do later on. It's great that 8 kilowatts. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, we may get almost to 10 with the higher performance panels. Yep.
That's good. So looking at the design of the roof, there looked to be a kind of bifurcation or division between the 2 units. Does that hinder at all your ability to have solar on the roof, given what you're going to give up for fire access?
I don't think so. We do need to run the parapet up for the fire ratings between the two units, but it's really just that wall, and then I think they would be distinct solar arrays for each owner. So the lot A would have its own array, lot B would have its own array. So there is a natural break there. And we'd probably do roof access from the terrace below to get up there, as opposed to putting a hatch in the roof to get up there.
Okay, that's helpful. And then I guess two more things that you might have already thought of, but just to flag. One is just the shading that you might cause with the wall around the roof. I think it looks like a wood wall. I'm not exactly clear in your drawings how how much shade that's going to cause. But this, the site goes north, and so you certainly don't want to have shading of your array if you can avoid it. And the other is the trees along Washington Boulevard that I guess will be planted, the 6 trees that are called for in the staff report. The future shading of a site. So you might be kind of thinking about what types of trees those will be to avoid future shading of the array.
That's a good point. We will definitely check that. Thank you.
Yeah, and kudos again for doing this, and it's certainly good to see, and would encourage other applicants to do this as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Schroll. Commissioner Sarli.
I'm just going to do a quick pile on with Commissioner Schroll's comments and concerns with the solar panel. And it sounds like the architect already mentioned that it's a net zero house. So another way to sort of have a less requirement for the solar panels, of course, is insulation and lower energy consumption. So it seems like you're already on top of it. So I would just like to second Mr. Schroll's comment, and also kudos to the design for being as environmental. And if anywhere you can stuff a little extra insulation, it's a good idea. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sarli. Any other comments or questions on the solar array sustainability? Okay, let's then move on to missing middle, and that's more of a generic discussion rather than specifically on this. Is there anything anybody would like to add on that? Yes, Commissioner Bagley.
Can I, before I kind of make my comment, can I ask the applicant at this point, do they know what they will be charging, ballpark idea, for each of the units on the property?
Tony or Mashoud, would you like to weigh in on that question? I don't know if you have a ballpark range that you have in mind.
Sure, Matt. This is Tony Chow. I'll respond on that. Obviously it depends on, the cost of the project. As things are a little bit unpredictable in terms of the building materials. But however, if everything goes to plan, I think, for new construction will be, right along market rate. This is really hard to predict at this point. Don't hold us to this, but our philosophy is to actually try to make it pretty attractive in terms of pricing, and and not try to price it too high.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess my comment, Mr. Chair, is I guess when Eric Gutschall, God bless him, first talked to me about missing middle, a lot of what I thought his vision was to open up not just other housing types, but to include more folks who couldn't be in the very high end. And I suspect if these units were out there today, they would probably go for over $1 million each. So I would just, as we have more conversations on this, I would just like to perhaps have that interjected into the missing middle, because there's, at just guessing current market value on this, it would not be the middle that would be able to afford this. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bagley. Commissioner Hughes.
So I do want to first of all say thank you to Commissioner Bagley for bringing my point home. I already had guesstimated that it was over $1 million for these units, which is absolutely what the developer deserves and should expect after an enduring process of getting through the site plan process. It's for that reason I will not be supporting. I also will not be opposing the project tonight. I think it's a wonderful project and a great typology, as staff likes to use the word. But we do ourselves a disservice by using the word missing middle in this conversation. If we had allowed this by right within the zoning ordinance, the developer this evening would not be bringing their architect, their lawyer, themselves, and a few others billing by the hour. They would not have endured at least several public meetings on this project. They would not have gone through revisions. They would have not have already accommodated solar unless it was for the market. They would have not changed for the size of the doors to respect for disabilities. And if we had put it as a requirement by right that the 6-foot sidewalk be maintained, they would have done it. These are the things we make in the trade-off process. As I've said for everyone, we can't always have it all. We have to trade off. There's not a net zero 100% affordable building that doesn't have a government subsidy behind it. And we ourselves need to think about whether this is the right way to do it. So I'm not going to say much more on this project. I appreciate Commissioner Patel leading it. I think that the duplex is a fine duplex. I do expect it to go for more than $1 million. My goodness, I hope it goes for more than $1 million after this whole process. But moving forward, if we want to use the word missing middle and all we're doing is allowing more typologies, we're not going to win the battle. If we want to increase home ownership, find more opportunities for people who are missing, as Commissioner Bagley said, we have to be willing to do these things by right and to allow our market forces, the developers who've come forward this evening, to do it without having to go through the enduring process we would normally expect of a JBG going for a 400 unit building to our community. I'll be silent from that, Commissioner Lantomi, and look forward to our vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Patel?
Thank you, Chair Lantomi. I want to associate myself with Commissioner Bagley and Commissioner Hughes's comments, and I think everybody saw that in the correspondence that I sent to my fellow commissioners in attaching my memo. Again, in my conversations with Ms. Sontag and Mr. Pfeiffer on this particular issue, we as Planning Commission need to be able to kind of get our thoughts together and be able to present those thoughts and those conversations with regard to the missing middle study, especially if the primary focus of that study is typology and not necessarily affordability in terms of increasing inventory. Because I, as Commissioner Bagley and as Commissioner Hughes had noted, my hope would be that we're talking about looking at inventory and increasing opportunities for people to be able to have housing options, but that would be attractive for people who are not able to afford $1 million homes. And we're looking at ways of being able to make Arlington more affordable and more attractive to people who are not already attracted to it and maybe could not are priced out of it. And so I look forward to Planning Commission being able to kind of formalize some of these discussions outside of this particular forum, because I don't think it's necessarily fair to the applicant for us to belabor this conversation and these points because it's not for them. But Commissioner Hughes raises a good point around what we should be thinking about and maybe where our voice can be heard around addressing our processes and where we can be thoughtful with staff around how we can streamline things to increase affordability in the long run, because that is, I think, what most people are thinking about when they hear the word missing middle. And it may be a branding problem if we're not really talking about affordability. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Patel. And before I move on to the other commissioners, I do want to certainly encourage you and all of us to be raising these type of issues before the staff who are working on missing middle, which is right now occurring. That process is in existence now. So yes, thank you for all of your comments. Commissioner Siegel, then Commissioner Steinberger, then Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also associate myself with Commissioner Hughes, a very detailed discussion about the terminology being used. this certainly is a missing middle housing type. However, it doesn't appear to be, I would also agree that it likely is not in the AMI range, either slightly above it or at it. I would like just a couple of quick questions. What is the square footage of each unit? That's one question. The other question would be for staff. I don't know if Ms. Sontag, I apologize, I was not able to participate in the SPRC, but was housing staff or CPHD missing middle staff consulted? Did they weigh in on this at all? Those are my two questions.
So to answer your first question, I believe the square footage is about 3,200 square feet. Matt Allman can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. And then we did consult some of the staff members working on the missing middle housing study. Of course, it's, we don't have any policy yet. It's still kind of in motion. I think this application actually came in before the housing study commenced, but we have kept in communication with them on to confirm that this is one of the typologies that's being explored right now.
Super. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. Commissioner Steinberger.
Hi, thank you. I really wanted to associate myself with some of the prior comments. I think Commissioner Patel really kind of put this very clearly, and understanding that this is something that we need to address and that we need to make our views clear as a commission, and understanding what the end goal of the missing middle study really is. But at the same time, it is bigger and also not sort of before us in terms of this specific SPRC that we are reviewing for this duplex. We're using this is the opportunity for the kind of a catalyst to say, well, hey, if these are the issues going to be coming before us, we need to make our stance kind of known and have that larger conversation. So I appreciate that this is teeing up that larger conversation, but I don't, from my perspective, believe that the larger conversation should belabor or in any way otherwise impact the votes we're making tonight and the decisions we're making tonight with regards to this duplex. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberger. Commissioner Sarley, and then Commissioner Buren.
Again, I'm just going to associate myself with the previous comments. I think Commissioner Hughes sort of hit the nail on the head, and Commissioner Patel's sensitivity, particularly to the applicant, I think is well received, and I totally agree with that. The one thing I would plug in for in these processes, again, we're always talking about flexibility, but I think the real desired sort of item on any sort of planning process or even planning commissions is predictability. I think, this developer or any other applicant that comes in front of us, what they really are looking for is predictability. And so I think as much as then when we start talking about the missing middle, we can create a very predictable and linear process in which, if we have to make it beyond the by right issue that Mr. Hughes was commenting, I think, again, we have to plan it for put as stringent or as, clear parameters as we can to make that process efficient and therefore, create this sort of missing middle opportunity. But I think, we're on the right vein here, and I think I agree with the commissioners and their prior comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Sarley. Commissioner Buren.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. I want to associate myself with the comments raised by Commissioner Hughes and Commissioner Patel. Commissioner Patel and I, in fact, had a sort of side conversation on this issue earlier today. If this is something that we feel should be addressed more broadly via a change to the zoning ordinance, that is something that is within our purview. It's true that it's not within what we're discussing tonight, but part of our responsibility as planning commissioners is if we see a trend in the sort of issues that come before us, either at our full-on PC hearings or we see these in the other meetings that we chair in the community. So we've likewise seen these with other issues over the past couple of years, and we have an opportunity at the end of the year to reference any issues like this that we've seen that look like a trend, that's something that really needs to be addressed at a higher level than us individually reacting to all of them. We also have the opportunity when we have a chance to sit in and weigh in on the CPHD work plan every year. And that's just a balancing act. CPHD has a lot on their plates these days, but we do have a chance to do that. So I encourage everyone to be thinking about these issues as they come up, and not just this one, but others. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjorn. Commissioner Morton?
Thank you. I do want to associate myself with my colleagues who have expressed interest in trying to make sure we're accommodating this type of project as in a more streamlined fashion. Associate myself with Commissioner Gearan and Sarli, I think in particular, somewhat in defense of staff, and maybe speaking to Commissioner Patel's issue of, is this a branding problem? The missing middle term, I have the book right here, really does refer to a typology. It is not, as it's written and as it's become popularized, it's not really referring to an income level. And maybe staff needs to really acknowledge that and make it clear. I think that they're maybe trying to adhere to this traditional idea of missing middle type. Things like bungalow courts and duplexes will often do provide affordable housing opportunities, but if we're talking about that term missing middle, it does, as originally conceived, talk about a form. So maybe we need to get a different term or think beyond that, or be forthright about what we're talking about. So thanks.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Morton, and I'd like to associate myself with your comments. I've been talking with staff on the missing middle, and from the beginning, they have certainly said that it is typology, not affordability. Affordability is something that one hopes would come out of having additional types of housing that can be built, which also implies more density, but that is something that I think we will have in our write-ups so that staff can see that. And I think the branding issue is very real, and they have to somehow make it clearer as to what the missing middle process is going to be about and what it's not going to be about. Commissioner Steinberger, your hand is still up, or you want to have another comment?
Yeah, and I really just wanted to hit that because I think, as Commissioner Morton just phrased it, I think I appreciate that the missing middle as sort of a concept has a specific derivation, definition, and meaning within the context of which the county is looking at it. At the end of the day, though, it is, as folks have said, a branding issue. We're going to get to the end of the study, and folks who haven't had the ability, for whatever reason, to kind of be following it, in all of the meetings and in sort of the interim steps, some sort of a report and results are going to be released, and a large portion of this county is going to go, why doesn't it talk about affordability? Why isn't it talking about, increasing available homes, at a different price point? And I think we need to be prepared for that conversation. And if that's the first time people are interacting with this experience and with the study, and for a lot of people it's going to be, that is not going to be a good outcome, and that is not going to be a good experience for the county as a whole or for the individuals living in the county. And that's something that we really need to be thinking about from kind of holistically what that's going to look like and trying to get ahead of it. Thank you.
I very much think that all of the comments we've been raising, and I will get to you in a moment, Commissioner Patel, I can see your hand up. We will have opportunity to weigh in on an interim basis where the missing middle study is going before it comes to us full blown. So when we have those info sessions, and that could be for either ZOCO or LRPC or for the full commission, again, as an informational item, I think it would be really important that we be raising these concerns, issues, observations to staff during those meetings, in addition to having them, of course, written down as part of our report for tonight's discussion. Commissioner Patel.
Thank you, Chair Lentami. And I think, again, I don't want to I actually didn't expect to speak so much on this, but I think that this is another space where we can talk about not operating in silos, right? And so, you know, we've spoken previously about the equity resolution where we talk about being a welcoming and diverse community, you know, opportunities to create different typology of housing. It's, you know, the thought here, if most people are thinking that that would mean that we can bring more people to this community, and it's an equity-based issue, we need to make sure that we're connecting all the dots. And I think back to our April discussion where Chair Ellen, tell me you and I actually had a discussion where we both raised this issue around historical considerations, what have kept people out of housing, and addressing the issue beyond the typical response, which is restrictive covenants, right? There's other policies and procedures that preclude people from getting into housing. And so I think we need to start connecting the dots here in a more holistic way, and how we are approaching this missing middle study while staying purist. And I appreciate Commissioner Morton's reference to the fact that missing middle is a term of art here, but that we may need to shift a little bit and make sure that we're addressing all of Arlington's priorities, and maybe, quite frankly, setting those priorities in a way that's actually meaningful. Because if we are not looking at affordability, we need to make that clear to the people who live here as well, and the people who would consider living here.
Thank you, Commissioner Patel. And I also think that this is something that we as a body also raised when we had the discussion of the Beach Street townhouses. We had a similar conversation. Commissioner Siegel, and I do see your hand up, Ms. Smith, but first let's get to Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. I would just recommend, with respect to this concern about silos, that when we get an information item on missing middle or associated with information item on missing middle, we also get a very quick summary update on the Housing Conservation District, progress there, outcomes there, and any other policies that the county has or is working on. Perhaps it's the housing element of the affordable housing element of the comp plan. I think this may well be a branding issue or a semantic, a definitional problem in and of itself, but the county does have a range of policies to deal with affordability. And I think it would be really good for us to have a briefing on the gamut, the range of them, to see whether we are, perhaps this is all summed up in the affordable housing element of the comp plan. I just don't know, haven't really thought about it, but I think this does raise the more general question about where we are with all the policies that we're working on. So I just, when you speak with the powers that perhaps you might suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. Ms. Smith, your hand is up.
Hi, Chair Lantelmi. Thank you. I just wanted to make the commission aware that staff is here and listening to this comment, and we acknowledge the comment, and we are expecting to engage with the LRPC a little bit later this year on the missing middle study. So you mentioned that as well, but I would expect staff to be engaging on the missing middle study with LRPC later this summer, and that we certainly would be doing that as well with the multifamily reinvestment study that Commissioner Siegel just mentioned, and eventually with the affordable housing master plan review process. So again, thanks for all the comments, and I just wanted to acknowledge that staff would be engaging and having more conversation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Smith. We did have on the list SBRC follow-up, but I think that may have been, as we really folded that into the missing middle discussion too, we have the process. Commissioner Bagley.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions as a follow-up to the SPRC, and this is for the applicant. During the SPRC, I asked if the neighbors had actually been, that they had contacted them. They said because of COVID, they had mailed something to them, but I just wondered if there is a plan for better communications moving forward. Also very interested in hearing what sort of construction plan will be going on, given that Washington Boulevard can't be used and the other street is kind of tiny. So, and lastly, I did ask, and it was also echoed by the PRC rep at the SPRC. Have you looked at any places where instead of just hauling everything off to a landfill, that we could do something more meaningful for the planet with the materials that are there in the existing 100-year-old single-family home? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Bagley. We'll take those in order. Your first question was about communications with neighbors. On my end, I always reach out to the civic associations and let them know when milestones are being hit along the way as we go through the site plan process. As it relates to the next door neighbors, Tony and Mashoud, I don't know if there have been any more recent updates since SPRC, but I know that you had taken the lead on communicating with them.
Yeah, Matt. Yeah, we just hand delivered, letters. But outside of that, because of COVID, we kind of felt uncomfortable.
Actually, we have
other doors. I'm sorry. I think someone was trying to talk.
Are there any other comments from the applicant?
Okay. I didn't, part of that got cut off. I don't know if others were able to hear the tail end of that response, but Tony or Mashoud, if there's anything else to add on the communication point, please chime in. And of course, as part of our standard site plan conditions, we'll be following all of the standard county processes for pre-construction community meetings. We have to designate a project liaison whose information will be shared with the county and shared with the civic association and neighbors, so they know, who to contact during construction if things are happening and they have questions. I guess that ties a little bit into the second question about construction planning. I am not probably the right person to answer this, other than to again reference some of the standard site plan condition requirements for having your materials stored on site and having your construction workers park on site, things like that. And of course, there's maintenance responsibilities that come with that too, so that you're keeping the site in a well-maintained condition. So again, I'll ping Tony and Mashoud if you guys have any other insights on what you anticipate for the construction process.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. This ties into both questions actually. Before start of our construction, we always distribute letters to the entire neighborhood, giving them a point of contact for the construction site and the project manager's phone numbers and all the contact information. And in terms of the construction process, before demolition of the house, we will contact companies such as Second Chance, Community Forklift. We'll go through all the material and salvage as much as it is feasible and it is possible. Part of our process with Green Choice and Net Zero always has been to recycle the material as best as we can. So we do engage with demolition companies where they do their best to actually sort material before disposing of them. Have I got everything?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bagley. Are there any other comments, questions? Okay, Commissioner Patel, do you have a motion for us?
I do. Oh, I had it teed up. Okay, here we go. I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the County Board adopt the attached ordinance to approve the subject site plan for 2 semi-detached dwelling units, including a 6-foot sidewalk along the Washington Boulevard frontage with modification of zoning ordinance requirements for lot size and density, yard setbacks, reduced parking ratio, and other modifications as necessary to achieve the proposed development plan, subject to the conditions of the attached ordinance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, who's the first one out?
Commissioner Sarley.
Thank you, Commissioner Sarley. Okay, do we have any discussion of the point on the motion? Okay, let's go ahead with the vote. Commissioner Siegel?
Aye.
Commissioner Stroll?
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes?
Abstain.
Commissioner Gearing?
Aye.
Commissioner Morton?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley?
Aye.
Commissioner Sarley?
Aye.
And I will vote aye as well. The motion passes 10 to 0 to 1.
It's unanimous. Just an abstention.
Right, that's your abstention. I have that. And Commissioner Patel, any further motions?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes has passed, and this matter is concluded. Thank you to applicants and the staff. Let's now move on to the second matter. Madam Clerk, please call that second item.
Yes, excuse me, item number 3 is the hotel conversions for temporary conversion of residential to hotel use. This is an informational item, but we are allowing public comment on this item.
Okay, why do we first public comment?
Ms. O'Connell?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, and thank you for allowing comment on an information item. I want to speak to you about how I hope you will frame this, which is about a housing issue and housing accessibility, as opposed to an AED, economic development, help the large apartment owners. Last month, you listened to 1555, and that was a major site plan amendment, but it didn't go to housing, disability, or age. And the housing staff at the housing meeting, when asked, because I was a public speaker, replied that it didn't affect the housing amounts in the affordable housing. So, but it's a policy issue of affordability and accessibility. You all can hear me, right?
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
Okay, so next week, the county board, without any policy, is going to be considering 3 site plans by Ditmar to carve out 75 units in 3 buildings for temporary hotel use. It's important, thanks to Ditmar, to understand that any apartment owner of scale like Ditmar doesn't have to offer year leases. They can do month by month, 30 days. They just can't do under 30 days. So my concern is that I believe housing should be a part of this discussion, the Housing Commission. The Disability Commission should be part of this discussion. I actually think landlord and tenant should be concerned about whether or not this is about the Ditmar apartment owners and the shoe stands carving out an amount of housing that allows them to keep their rents up. And I sent to you, thank you, Ms. Johnson, 2 links, one to show that there's no shortage of hotel rooms, and 2, the other one to show that not only are rents bouncing back in Arlington, but there's some of the highest rents in the area. So these units an alternative could be to reduce the rent so that they're affordable to more people. I believe that seniors, for instance, might welcome an affordable unit in a high-rise building 2 blocks from the library or 2 blocks from George Mason campus if the rent was slightly reduced. There are rental options for these buildings that reach people who need housing versus carving them away for hotel rooms so that they can inflate their own residences and make additional profit by day to day. So I'm urging you to have a holistic policy look, to encourage the board to bring in disability. I don't have a personal view on how you should come out on this or how the county should come out. But I think it's unfortunate that the county is going to consider the DITMAR applications as minor site plan amendments without any policy. And I appreciate your weighing in on policy in terms of 1555. If you wonder why it's just me you're hearing from, it's because of the fractured way in which these things come up. I only know about the DITMAR because I have a unit in courthouse, and I saw that they were trying to do this with Cortland Towers. And I watch Roslyn because I used to live in Colonial Village. So people don't know. And in terms of your discussion of missing middle, most people think that you're doing, that this is being pursued to increase affordable options.
Ms. O'Connell?
Cutting me off. All right. Well, thank you for your patience. I really appreciate everyone's assistance. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your comments. Do we have any commissions here who wish to address this? I do not see any. Commissioner Stroll, can you give us a quick report on how the county board addressed this issue at the last meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So prior to the meeting, I did send around notes from the last meeting, and my apologies to my fellow commissioners for the tardiness with which I've passed that along. To characterize the discussion, so the county board, when they considered the Penzance request for the temporary conversion, the main discussion was around kind of the why 5 years or why 7 in the applicant's view, what has changed in the market, what has changed with the temporary use, why has it gone from 2 years to 5? So a lot of discussion around that. So as it got to a motion, it became clear that 3 of the members of the county board, so county board members Karen Tonis, Dave Ferranti, and Crystal were all of the opinion that the Planning Commission's recommendation was more in line with where they were, that they should stay something that is used as a lease-up conversion to mitigate the any of the effects that can be, any of the kind of downsides for a developer in that initial kind of lease-up period, but that it not be extended to a longer period. Board members Dorsey and Garvey were definitely more willing to entertain it for the longer period. Mr. Dorsey mentioned that he was concerned that that 2-year period was not going to allow for enough time to understand if it was working or not. So ultimately, Mr. Carantonis moved the Planning Commission's recommendation. And when it came down to a vote, there were 3 on the affirmative, 2 in the negative. and it passed. So that's where things stand now. There was no kind of further guidance to staff, around developing any policy, which I know is part of the nature of our discussion, but was not something we recommended, and the board did not address that issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Schroll. I don't know, open it for discussion. What I'd like to do is, Madam Clerk, could you put up on the screen the draft motion or resolution that I had circulated to the other commissioners earlier this week?
Yes.
So again, there is not a motion on the table, but I'm putting this up here so we have something to look at as part of our discussion this evening of this, assuming anybody wants to weigh in. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Commissioner
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for putting this together, and thank you for pushing us so that we would discuss this. Since last month's, when we talked about this at last month's meeting, there was one public speaker that spoke to the how doing this or allowing these conversions would affect the Airbnb business. And I guess my question to staff is, how does the local hotel industry feel about this? And I also, aren't hotels, don't you have to do certain things to say you're a hotel? Do we just say, is the policy now, or is there a process that maybe we haven't been told about that talks about, if you are going to do this conversion, you have to do X, Y, and Z, like we would think a hotel would do? I would like to also say, just from a market standpoint, even prior to COVID, there were a number of rental units sitting empty. They were at market or above market. So that was an issue before. There are hundreds of more rental units under construction now. I'm concerned that we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg here. The rental market has been very sluggish in the buildings. I will say that Ditmar has been a very good neighbor and has been very involved in, at least I can speak to my own neighborhood, the Ballston, Virginia Square neighborhood. But, nobody has a crystal ball here. So, and what would be involved if there were something, is there an incentive in the process, or should there be an incentive? Or is there something when an applicant comes in with a project that talks about the possibility that, perhaps they would have to or need to consider a hotel conversion for parts of it. So there's just a lot of questions that I have, and maybe there's a policy for it, or maybe there should be more policies. And so I thought this would be an opportunity for me to ask them in the forum here. So thank you.
Would anyone from staff like to jump in and see if you can address any of Commissioner Bagley's?
Sure. So good evening, Commissioners. Aaron Schreiber with the Planning Division. And to address the question was raised by Commissioner Bagley, the viewpoint from the hotel market or the hospitality industry. Again, as just to reiterate something that we mentioned last month, is that one of the things that we're looking at is the sharp reduction in the number of hotel rooms during the pandemic. We're approaching about 1,100 lost hotel rooms during this period. And so one of the things that we're aware of through our consultation with Arlington Economic Development and their hospitality partners is that this short-term use conversion is not really seen as a threat, because when we do these, you'll notice there are very detailed conditions that require them to meet a standard that is the same as a hotel room. So what we've been hearing from the hospitality market is that this is not a threat and it's just more competition. And generally competition is not seen as a bad thing as long as the playing field is leveled. And in this case it is, because they do have to meet a hotel standard from a life safety perspective. So there is that investment that the residential building owner makes to do things such as, make the appropriate building code revisions regarding fire safety, so additional sprinklers, additional means of egress if it's necessary, additional materials of how you get out during an emergency. And so they also, one other thing that's really important is they do pay into the TOT tax. And so that's another way of leveling the playing field, that these will operate just like a hotel use. So that answers, hopefully that answers your question about the hospitality market and hotels. And then just in terms of what type of policies are we applying when we look at these proposals, what we do as planning professionals is we are looking to our land use policies, and we really kind of go through an analysis of looking at whether the use of hotel, and it becomes a use of hotel by definition due to the length of the stay, because it's less than 30 days. And so for that, we look at whether the hotel use is permitted in the zoning district, and then whether it's supported by our land use policy. So in particular, the GLUP or any associated sector plan or area plan. However, we do recognize that there is a growing or a concern in the community, as expressed last month by both the Planning Commission as well as the County Board. And I think it's this motion that the Planning Commission is considering tonight, which is raising the level of the interest in that issue. And it looks like asking the board to direct the manager and then ultimately our department and the planning division to take this up as a larger item within our work program, which is under consideration right now. So this is all very helpful information, and what that policy or guidance would look like is something that would remain to be determined once we start that work, should the board direct the manager to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber.
Commissioner Steinberger, and then Commissioner Schroll.
Thank you. I would really like to commend staff and Chair Lantelmi for bringing this before us in such a timely manner. Really, I feel that, as we raise the issue on the most recent project with regards to temporary unit conversion to a hotel use, and really enumerated and kind of addressed the larger policy conversation that was bringing up for us, and as it's gone to the board since then, I'm really quite proud of the fact that we've been able to sort of bring that as a policy item back to this body so quickly. I feel a little bit like, I asked for pizza and pizza was delivered. And certainly I think that the meaningful nature of our ability to have this conversation in a timely manner is a benefit to the community, is a benefit to developers to understand where to reach whatever resolution we can on this issue, and really put that before not just us, but ultimately the county board in some manner, that gives certainty to developers who might be considering this. And as this will come up again and again, as we are, continuing to develop in Arlington, and we're going to continue to see this matter come before us. And if there is an underlying policy shift that is happening, developers need to know about that as a factor in how they are planning to lease up their buildings if something has changed and we're approaching this in a different manner. So I really wanted to commend that, and also state that, I did have the opportunity to review Chair Lantelmi's draft motion, and I'm really very supportive of the direction that it's going in, and I think it takes us in a positive direction. So I am appreciative of that, and thank you for putting that together. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberger. Commissioner Schroll, and after that, Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a question for you, Mr. Chairman, and then I think a question for staff. So given that the county board did kind of weigh in on the matter that we kind of put before it last month on the Penzance issue. I don't know if you or others think it prudent to reference that in any of the whereas clauses that the county board has weighed in on the at least its preference currently on the length of these conversions. So I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you have any reaction to that currently, and I do have a question for staff. Yeah, I'm inclined to not address it in this. The county board certainly is fully aware of how they voted. We are making a recommendation to them. We're looking for study the policy and have policy recommendations come out. I think staff is also fully aware of where the county board has gone, and that would, of course, be considered in making that policy. So I'm not sure it necessarily will add anything by having it in here, unless there's specific language that you'd like to raise. Yeah, I think it's fine. Not having it in there, I was just wondering for to capture kind of the full breadth of what has happened, but I don't think it changes what our direction would be and our vote would be. So it's fine. Okay. So thank you for that. Mr. Schreiber, just a question for you, if I might. During our last meeting, you kind of walked through how a staff would analyze these conversions, and you walked through just now in response to Commissioner Bagley's question, the items you would consider for conversions, which is helpful. I think the thing would be helpful to me would be to understand how staff evaluates a 2-year conversion versus a 3-year conversion versus a 5-year conversion versus a 7-year conversion. And I think we got into this a little bit last time, but I'm interested in kind of what policy guidance, what things you're looking at or have looked at, and how additional study might provide you additional guidance and also us additional guidance. Thank you.
So to start with, a lot of that I think the topic that you're raising there, Commissioner Stroll, is really something that we would need to look at as part of any analysis on any of this additional guidance or policy work, because the initial term of 2 years that we were looking at on some of these projects really was related to that initial lease-up period. And what we've seen over the last 2 applications, partly due to COVID, but also I think an evolution of the marketplace for this unit type of conversion, is that it's no longer, or these operators are no longer just relegated only to WeWork. The market has grown, and the new players in the market, such as with the Cost of Living, who is the intended operator of the Penzance project, they're looking to make a larger investment. So rather than just take individual units that were not leased at that time and then operate them for a period of time up until the building owner is able to lease those units, some of the new operators like the Cost of Livings are actually now investing to make those true hotels. And so they're not looking to potentially be squeezed out after 18 months and then not be able to recoup that investment. They are looking to make a longer term investment. That's why they were seeking, they being Penzance, were seeking 7 years. Ultimately, I think what they told the commission, and then they did tell the board, they would have been okay with 5. And so again, that's just going to be something that we're going to have to look at if we're directed by the county board to really look closer at this industry and then see really what are the influencing factors other than just what we've seen anecdotally through these 6 applications now. And then what that means for the larger policy or land use implications. But it is a much broader discussion than just looking at a short term for 2, 3, or 5 years. We're really trying to understand what the bigger impact is, whether that's 2 years and beyond. So all things that we'll consider if we are directed by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Commissioner Siegel? And then Commissioner Guerra.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi, and thank you, Mr. Schreiber, for taking us through staff's thinking up to this point, given what has transpired. I'm very supportive of this motion, and I thought also whether we might not specify additional information in the language of the motion or the proposal of the motion. And I think not, but I therefore would take the opportunity now to just put down to thoughts on, and I think everybody's aware of this, but I just sum it up. The slow change over time from the AIM Center, and I missed it, and I think staff may have missed it as well, which I believe has been approved with a 5-year lease-up period with starting with hotels and converting as the lease-up period went through. Perhaps I just put this question on the table. What was the justification there? Was it the same justification we heard for Penzance, which was really thinking about a market change rather than a temporary stopgap measure for lease-up? That's one issue. Another reason why we really need policy guidance, because we don't want to allow we don't want a policy, or no policy allows different results, and that's not fair. The other point I wanted to just make was Commissioner Hughes sent around something quite interesting, I guess a debate between Richard Florida, who would agree that this approach would limit affordability of housing by limiting the supply and skimming some units off for another use. And another gentleman, Mast, I think was the name, who spoke about filtering. So I'm hoping, and perhaps Mr. Schreiber can respond to this question as well, that these sort of the AED might be brought in to help us understand the market forces at work here as well. Thanks.
Sure, and I'll just apologize in advance. I do have a new puppy who's sitting under my desk right now, so if you hear her squeaking, that's one of her new toys. But Commissioner Siegel is absolutely correct. I mean, one of the things that we've started is an internal working group where we've been involving our partners from AED as well as housing, and then others, including transportation and other groups as well, especially with our building code official and his team. And so we'll be a broader group, again, if we're directed to do so, because, again, I think that what we're hearing and what your motion is presenting is just the desire to have more guidance and to have a better understanding of what the overall impacts are on just the housing market in general, and not just isolated to maybe that one building in that submarket, but looking a little bit more broadly. So we have been getting some good advice. We have started doing some peer research and looking at what our neighboring jurisdictions are doing to address this issue, because obviously this is not just an Arlington issue. This is happening throughout the country. And so those are the type of things that we would continue, but our partners in AED, including those who work within the hospitality market, would be actively involved in this.
I really appreciate that, Mr. Schreiber. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Garrett?
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi, and thank you, colleagues, for starting this conversation. So I've thought about this issue a lot as someone who used to be a housing coordinator in the San Francisco Bay Area, admittedly many years ago, but I feel like I need to know more. When we first heard about these conversions a couple of years ago, we all felt that this was very innovative and we lauded that. We thought this was a terrific way to go forward, the conversion. But now that this feels like a trend, and I think Mr. Schreiber cited 6 instances, I want us to be very thoughtful in how we address this, because we are essentially creating policy with these decisions that we make up on the dais. And developers come to us over the last couple of years for a change in this use to hotel units. They have trouble renting up, and they're looking for an option that will bring in revenue as they achieve full rent up. This seems to be the major issue. And what is the reason for this? Is it COVID or is it market changes? And then what is the reasonable amount of time for this temporary use for a hotel? And what other options are out there? Because when this was first raised, I remember arguing at the time, is there room for both hotel use and perhaps temporary affordable housing? Either would bring in revenue as the applicant tried to achieve full rent up and get a lower vacancy rate. Because Commissioner Siegel just raised the issue, I want to address it. You know, filtering is a theory in housing that as some housing gets older and newer housing is built, that housing that was previously luxury high-end housing is sort of outpaced by newer housing with better amenities and better views and better locations. And that older housing becomes more affordable in comparison. But in Arlington, our land values tend to be so high that it is more feasible for developers to tear down and rebuild. We do not have a lot of filtering in Arlington. We do not have a lot of old housing that's still standing around and being affordable. So I worry that as we're trying to accommodate our developers, who we welcome for helping us see our vision in our county, that we are somehow tinkering too much with the market here and avoiding an opportunity to provide some more moderate income housing, which relates to our previous discussion, missing middle, not just a typology, but trying to provide housing for a missing part of our population. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Geer. Commissioner Morton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just quickly associate myself with Commissioner Guerin's comments. I think filtering can work. In a hot market like this, I think there often need to be additional policies to ensure that we're encouraging affordable housing, because there's sort of, you know, sometimes an unlimited supply for the housing opportunities that we do have. So I definitely get the theory of it, and I think it can work, but I'm not fully convinced that that's the only answer. I think we need to make sure that we're supplementing that with additional policies and incentives or subsidies of some sort. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Morton. Commissioner Siegel, is your hand still up from before, or do you have something to do? Thank you. Okay, any other comments from the commission? Seeing none, I will then go ahead and make a motion. I move the following. Whereas the Planning Commission has heard applications for the temporary conversion of new multifamily dwelling units to hotel usage over the past 2 years, and whereas applications for such conversions have been seeking longer temporary terms, and whereas the first applications for such conversions were for the lease-up period of new buildings, and whereas applications for such conversions have expanded to cover units in existing multifamily buildings developed by site plan, and whereas Arlington County continues to experience a growing lack of affordable dwelling units as noted in the affordable housing component of the Arlington County Comprehensive Plan, and whereas due to economic effects of COVID-19, hotels within Arlington County have experienced a drastic drop in business leading to the closure of some of them, and whereas the Planning Commission believes it, along with other commissions, staff, applicants, and the public, need policy guidance consistent with the comprehensive plan to properly evaluate and make recommendations to the county board regarding such applications, therefore, be it resolved that it is the sense of the Planning Commission that the county board should direct the county manager to add to the work plan of the Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development the setting of policy guidance for the conversion of dwelling units within multifamily buildings to hotel use.
Second.
And that
beat me to it.
Commissioner Schroll.
Okay, Commissioner Schroll, thank you. And yes, does anybody want to speak further to the motion or discuss, raise anything? Seeing no further comments, let's go for a vote. Commissioner Siegel.
Aye.
Commissioner Schroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Commissioner Gearing.
Aye.
Commissioner Morton.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberger.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley.
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The resolution passes unanimously. Thank you. We can now move on to get my script up here. Just a moment. Oop, wrong one. We have a few things on the agenda. It's time for the approval of the minutes of our April 5th and 7th meetings. I did send some edits in earlier today. Are there any further changes from the commission to the two minutes of the two meetings? Seeing none, do I hear a motion from anybody to approve the minutes of the April 5th meeting?
Commissioner Lantelmi?
Yes?
It's Commissioner Guerin. I had a question about the meeting minutes, and I know Ms. Johnson was working on this to identify who the nay vote was. I think it was April 5th. Was that? Okay, thanks.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Yes. Hello, commissioners. Commissioner Guerin, looking back at my notes, I believe that nay vote was Commissioner Sarli.
Would you mind if the minutes reflected that just for our records?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Then any motion will then be subject to the edits noted by Commissioner Guerin. Do we have a motion for approval of the April 5th minutes?
Oh, I move to approve. Say it differently. I move that we, I don't know how else to say, I move that we approve the April 5th minutes.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second, far less dramatic than Commissioner Patel.
Okay, let's go ahead. Commissioner Siegel?
Aye.
Commissioner Stroll?
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes?
Aye.
Commissioner Guerin?
Aye.
Commissioner Morton?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel? I think that was an aye. Commissioner Steinberger?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley?
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Do we have a motion for the April 7th meeting? Somebody step up.
Mr. Chairman, I move adoption of the meeting minutes from the April 7th meeting of the Arlington County Planning Commission.
Do we have a second?
Second, Elizabeth Wharton.
Thank you, Commissioner Morton. Let's move ahead with the vote. Commissioner Siegel?
Aye.
Commissioner Schroll?
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes?
Aye.
Commissioner Guerin?
Aye.
Commissioner Morton?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Abstain.
Abstain. Commissioner Steinberger?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley?
Aye.
Commissioner Sarli?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Good, the minutes have passed. Now let's move on to, first of all, do we have any staff report on current matters? Mr. Pfeiffer, anything to report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have nothing to report this month.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer. Now from the subcommittees, Commissioner Morton, Sbrc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have much to report either. We have coming up at our next commission meeting, we'll be reviewing the Potomac Yard Land Base C East and the RCA building. Those SPRC processes have been complete. We have a little bit of a lull, kind of a calm before the storm. And so get ready for me to email some of you to ask you to step up for some new projects. But as far as I know, for the end of the month, we won't have any additional SPRC meetings. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. For LRPC, Commissioner Schroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this coming week, May 11th, we have a joint LRPC ZOCO meeting. about potential changes to the red top cap site. So these are changes to or proposed modifications to height and some of the transitions and step backs for that site. When we go to the Sbrc report, we'll see if Commissioner Patel has anything to add on that. On May 25th, we're going to have the next meeting of the Clarendon sector plan update process, the LRPC for that. Next week, we also have a meeting on the Penn Place LRPC. So I want to pass it off to Commissioner Gearon to see if she has anything or if she can update us on that process.
Thanks, Commissioner Schroll. Yes, we had our first LRPC meeting where we were looking at changes from the approved site plan for Penn Place and looking for whether or not some of these changes were within the realm of possibility. Staff helped, and we parsed these out into changes to use, more office use, changes to height and density, and then changes to circulation. And it's changes to circulation that we did not really reach any consensus on. So that's what our second LRPC meeting will be about on Wednesday, May 12th. If you haven't already seen it, it's an unusual site. It's a large site, it's 10 acres. It's an exciting site for us to all weigh in on. Everybody's view is going to be really helpful here. But circulation for autos is all underground. There's no auto use on the site itself. There are pathways for pedestrians and bicycles. And so that's new for us, even though it's exciting. So that's what we're primarily going to focus on. I'm co-chairing this with Commissioner Sarli, and he will be leading that meeting. So when you hear from us next month, he'll give you an update on it. But we look forward to seeing as many of you who liked attending next week.
Thank you, Commissioner Gearon. Commissioner Patel, do you have anything for Sbrc?
No, Chairman, tell me, Commissioner Schroll covered it. We had the May 11th joint Sbrc LRPC meeting, and I have nothing further to report.
Thank you. Commissioner Steinberger, anything for PFRC?
Sorry, I was still on mute. No, other than that, I believe there was actually an update from county staff with regards to the Career Center project tonight, but they scheduled it at the same time as this meeting, so I have no idea what happened.
Yes, I got that same notice and noted that also. Yeah, that was scheduled by the Arlington Public Schools. Commissioner Hughes, anything on the Form-Based Code Advisory Committee?
Nothing on the Form-Based Code Advisory Committee, and if you just followed Commissioner Slatt's Twitter feed, you know what happened tonight at the Career Center meeting.
Okay, very good.
I don't follow Commissioner Slatt's Twitter feed, nor do I intend to really follow anyone on Twitter, but thank you.
I do, so I'll check it out. And Commissioner Siegel for the Pentagon City PDSP.
Yes, I do have something to share with you. I have been sort of running down in summary form what we've done month by month. We are looking to the summer, May and June, to see a final development scenario vetted by the community over several community workshop meetings and picked apart in focus group. There's really been a lot of community participation. What I call to your attention tonight are a couple of features of the update plan. This plan will not look like the Crystal City sector plan or any of the other sector or small area plans. We can't do it in 1 year. And in fact, we may be looking at a design that will be more efficient and present really community and developer priorities and combine them into a framework that I think we will welcome. What we're looking at are community assets and benefits, as well as the private sector's constraints and challenges and abilities. This is great because we've often at the end of an SPRC had 5 minutes to consider community benefits, which often as not are still under negotiation. This is a different approach from the plan side. So that's one thing you might want to just cogitate on. I think it's a really, really good design, and it will be helpful for clarity, transparency, and efficiency. The other yin-yang that I wanted to bring to your attention was the design of this plan is to also establish fixed community assets, roads, paths, green ribbon, biophilic treatment, things the community over this period of vetting have come to consensus on. That is fixed. What will be flexible is what you will see in SPRC, how a developer accommodates or honors those fixed public assets. That I think is also important because what we've seen with some of our sector plans is that sometimes they're so detailed that 10 years on, the market changes, preference change, and then we're struggling with a plan that we'd like to honor, but maybe has gone a bit out of date. So instead of looking at how specific a plan is to give the community the comfort it needs in terms of looking forward to what it's going to get, we're looking at fixed versus flexible. So I would suggest maybe you give that a little bit of thought. Finally, what's quite exciting is that as we look at the Penn Place SPRC, we are at the same time looking at the update. There's one sort of space corner where Met Park, Penn Place, and the new Brookfield development of the TSA sites are all coming together. So do keep in mind the boundaries and borders of the different focuses that we'll have. We'd like to see, I think this is the case, something that unifies the entire district and makes it coherent. So we're not only taking a deep dive into each site, but looking at these sites together as they are undergoing planning and review. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Siegel. Thank you, staff, applicants, members of the public for your time and consideration and patience this evening. The items that we heard this evening will be going to the County Board on May 15th or May 18th, and Planning Commissioner Gearan will be representing us at those County Board hearings. Many staff labored to make this virtual meeting run as smoothly as it has, so thanks to all of you, especially to our clerk, Ms. Johnson, to Joanne Harrison, and to a shout out to SPRC Supervisor, Mr. Pfeiffer, and our technical wizard, David Wood, and others who made it all possible. That said, the meeting is adjourned for this evening. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jean. Nice job. Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Good night.